Hello, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a guy we haven't had on in a while, James Rickards. Of course, he is the author of the runaway bestseller, Currency Wars, The Making of the Next Global Crisis. He's also a Wall Street insider. He is an investment banker. He has a deep resume. James Rickards, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg.
You know, I know this connection isn't great because you're coming to us from your home in Connecticut, but your content's always great. And I got to come back to this line in your title. You know, everybody refers to your book as Currency Wars. But this line underneath it, the subtitle, The Making of the Next Global Crisis, seems kind of prophetic to me. I mean,
Right.
Back when you wrote this book, everybody was, QE's going to take care of everything, everything's good. How close are we to the next global crisis?
Well, we're certainly closer. It's an interesting point that you make, Greg. When when you write a book, you start out with a presentation of the publishers, and you maybe talk to a couple of different publishers. And when I pitched this book to Portfolio Penguin Random House, now they're my publisher, I said, this was back in 2011. I said, I don't want to write the 15th book on the last crisis. I want to write the first book on the next crisis. There were a lot of good books on the crisis of 2008. Too Big to Fail, and Charlie Gasparino had a book, Andrew Ross Sorkin had a book. There were a lot of good ones. I wanted to write a book on the next crisis. Well, it's now 3 years later. We just dig a couple of data points. It's not just speculation. What was the problem in 2008? Well, the problem in 2008, among other things, was too big to fail banks. Well, those banks are now bigger. They have a higher percentage of total assets in the banking system. Their derivatives books are bigger. In other words, everything that was wrong in 2008 is worse today. So one should expect a liquidity crisis sooner than later. I'm not saying next month or even next year, but certainly in the coming years, through the 5-year time frame, I would expect a global collapse and liquidity crisis worse than 2008. And actually, a very important distinction between 2008 and the next one is that, the last time in 2008 when the crisis started, the Fed's balance sheet was $800 billion. Today, their balance sheet is $3.3 trillion and increasing at a rate of $1 trillion a year. Now, in other words, they printed $2.5 trillion to paper over the last crisis. So what's going to happen when the next liquidity crisis hits? They're going to be able to print $3 trillion more. I mean, they can't go up to $6 trillion and $9 trillion. There's already a debate inside the Fed, led by Jeremy Stein and others, about the size of the Fed's balance sheet. You get different points of view. You talk to, Charles Evans at the Chicago Fed, Dennis Lockhart at the Atlanta Fed, or James Bullard at the St. Louis Fed, Jeremy Stein is a governor, Janet Yellen, who's vice chairman. You do get all different views on this, but the point is there's a debate about how big it can be. I doubt it can go to $6 or $9 billion. So you're going to have a crisis worse than the last one because the banking system is bigger without the resources of the Fed because the Fed's tapped out. So that's what we're looking at sometime in the next few years.
There's a lot of talk about this tapering, and you came out recently and said, no way. The economy's not better. The economy is going to force them not to taper. Please explain that for us.
The expectation is the Fed will not taper in September, but it is a close call. I don't want to put a stake in the ground and be categorical about that. They may taper, they may not. My view is they won't. The reason they won't is because the economy is fundamentally weak. We've got 50 million on food stamps, 24 million unemployed or underemployed, 11 million on disability. All these numbers are going up, by the way. People look at so-called green shoots, employment rates coming down, but that's because people are dropping out of the workforce, and so the labor force is shrinking, not so many people are getting jobs. So the fundamentals are weak. I don't think they will taper, but if they do, watch out, because they'll be reducing monetary ease in a depression with borderline deflation. So my expectation is they won't taper, but if they do, I think they'll have to increase asset purchases by March or April of 2014. In other words, they'll have to reverse course. And by the way, that's the history of quantitative easing. They ended QE1 after a little bit of time. They went back to it. They ended QE2 after a hiatus. They went back to it. They started QE3, and then they increased QE3 after 4 months from $40 billion a month to $85 billion a month. So every time they cut back, they have to reverse course. It's really a stop-go monetary policy, which is almost the worst of all possible worlds. You could argue for tapering in the sense that the Fed should get out of manipulating markets, or you could argue for continued ease because the economy needs the help. But the one thing you can't argue for is cutting back and then reversing course. But that flip-flop strategy is exactly what the Fed's been doing.
You've mentioned this, all the dreadful, food stamp numbers and unemployment numbers, how the economy is not getting better. And you wrote just the other day about how we it's shaping up to be two Americas. Would you explain your theory or your premise that we are looking like two Americas here?
Yeah, I mean, it's the old joke about, Bill Gates walks into a bar and on average everyone's a billionaire because he's worth $50 billion. But the point is, you can't just look at the averages, you have to look at the underlying. The rich are getting richer. I mean, I know it's a cliche, but it's literally true. Economists have a measure of that. It's called the Gini coefficient, and it measures income inequality. The United States is now passing Mexico. For decades, Mexico, or longer perhaps, Mexico was the quintessence of an oligarchical society skewed in favor of the rich. Well, empirically, the U.S. has a worse skew or worse Gini coefficient than Mexico. So we've become a kind of oligarchy. Meanwhile, you look at the disability. Why is disability going up so much? Are people getting unhealthy? Well, no. The reason is that when you go on unemployment, you have 100 weeks of benefits. Well, what happens when your 100 weeks run out? That's about 2 years. So people who went on unemployment in 2010, 2011, their benefits have expired. So what do they do? They go on disability. They say, my back hurts or my shoulder hurts or whatever. I mean, look, there are some genuinely able people, and they should be helped. But a lot of this new disability are people with, not serious complaints at all, who are using disability as a form of extended unemployment. Now, the problem with disability is it's lifetime. Once you get on it could come off. So we're creating a permanent class of so-called disabled workers, which also reduces the workforce and hurts the economy. So when you look at what's actually going on, there is, Cartier and Tiffany and all the shops on Fifth Avenue are doing fine. The rich are getting richer. Penthouses in New York are now routinely going for $90 million or more. So that side of things is fine. It's a very, very small group. It's not the 1%. It's kind of the 1/10 of 1%. But the rest of the economy is stuck in the mud.
And last question is about gold confiscation. A lot of chatter out there about, periodically about how, they're going to take our gold, they're going to take this. I think they may confiscate some gold out of maybe GLD or some Fed holdings of foreign gold, but I just have a hard time believing they're going to confiscate individuals' gold. What's your view on gold confiscation?
Well, you can never rule it out, but I don't think it's particularly likely. One of the reasons is, the last time the government confiscated gold, of course, was 1933. The problem then is there was much more trust in government. It was a very desperate time. We were in the fourth year of the Great Depression. Price level, industrial production had fallen, unemployment had skyrocketed. The economy was in desperate shape, and people trusted the president. So when President Roosevelt, people did it. All that trust is gone. It's been 30 years of, whether it's starting with the Watergate or all the way up to the IRS scandals of today, people don't anymore. So I don't think they would necessarily do as they're told, so to speak. So I think that's one problem. The government knows that, so they probably wouldn't try it. They might try to seize gold that's in banks. They might try to put on some kind of windfall profits tax. There are a number of things that the government might do along those lines, but I wouldn't rule anything out. But I'm not worried about them seizing the gold in the private warehouses, because I think that gold will be gone before the government gets around to it. COMEX stocks are being depleted. GLD stocks are being completed. There's huge physical demand all over the world. So a lot of that gold might be gone by the time the government wakes up.
So you don't think confiscation of gold, basically by and large, isn't going to work, ain't going to happen?
Well, look, I don't think it's very helpful to be categorical about anything. I'm not going to say it ain't going to happen. I just don't think it'll happen. I think it's, because I think the government will find it's very difficult to enforce.
James Rickards, the author of the runaway bestseller, Currency Wars, The Making of the Next Global Crisis. James Rickards, not a great connection today, but great content. Thank you for coming on and talking to the visitors of USAWatchdog.com. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.